The woman at the gate. The rain had been falling for hours, soaking the cracked soil and beating softly against the tin roof of Daniel Grant's aging farmhouse. A gray mist clung to the hills, erasing the sky in a smudge of grief and memory. Daniel leaned on the porch railing, his coffee growing cold in his hands, as he stared across the fields his late wife once called their forever. Grief had a strange way of stretching time. It had been 2 years since Helen passed, yet her voice still lingered in the rooms, tucked in between folded blankets and the half-read books on the mantel. Daniel spoke little these days. The farm provided routine, and that was enough. Until that night, a sharp knock startled him from his haze. Not the door, something softer, irregular. He stepped off the porch, boots splashing through muddy puddles, and saw them. A woman stood just outside the gate, drenched and shivering, her arms wrapped tightly around 3 small children, triplets, no older than 4. They huddled close, eyes hollow, clothes clinging to skeletal frames. One of them coughed violently, the sound brittle against the wind. Daniel's instinct, buried under layers of sorrow, flared. "Are you all right?" he called, his voice hoarse from disuse. The woman didn't answer at first. Her lips trembled, but not from the cold alone. When she finally spoke, it came as a whisper. "We need a place, just for tonight. Please." Daniel hesitated. This wasn't the kind of place people stumbled upon by accident. And yet, the desperation in her posture, the fear in her eyes, it was undeniable. He opened the gate without another word. Inside, the farmhouse was simple but warm. Clara, he learned her name only after the children had eaten, refused to sit at the table until the kids had finished every crumb. She hovered over them with the intensity of someone who'd had to shield them from hunger too often. "I can sleep in the barn," she said, her voice quiet, eyes downcast. "We won't be any trouble." Daniel studied her. Dirt clung to her face, a faint bruise shadowed her left cheek, and her shoes were 2 sizes too big. One of the children, Eli, he thought, clutched her torn jacket like it was armor. "No one's sleeping in the barn tonight," he replied. "There's an extra room. Clean sheets. You'll use it." She didn't thank him. Instead, she looked away, as though gratitude required trust, and she couldn't afford that yet. Later, after the kids had fallen asleep, 1 on the couch, 2 in the guest bed, Daniel noticed a soaked backpack near the door. It had been left unzipped in the rush to warm the children. Inside was a single photo, a man in a military uniform, his arm wrapped around Clara. She was smiling in the picture, radiant and carefree. A contrast so sharp it felt like cruelty. The man's face lingered with Daniel longer than it should have. He poured another cup of coffee and stood at the kitchen window, watching the rain drizzle down. The questions nagged at him. Where had she come from? Why had she run? And why did his silence feel heavier than most people's words? He wasn't ready to confront those answers yet. Not tonight. Before heading to bed, Daniel paused by the couch where one of the little girls, Lily, slept, a scrap of blanket curled around her like a shield. She looked peaceful, safe. It was the first flicker of something he hadn't felt in years. Not love, not yet, but the fragile breath of purpose. Upstairs, beside his bed, sat Helen's old journal. The leather was worn, the spine cracked from years of thumbing through her neat, slanted handwriting. He hadn't opened it since the day of her funeral. But tonight, drawn by a nameless pull, he did. "If you ever find someone in need, Daniel," one entry read, "open the door. Even if your heart isn't ready. Especially then." Outside, thunder rolled far off in the distance. And for the first time in months, he didn't dread the coming morning. Cracks in the silence. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, bleeding gold across the fields like a promise not yet kept. Daniel stirred a pot of oatmeal at the stove, listening to the quiet shuffle of feet behind him. The children emerged first, tiny, unsure, eyes darting between him and the warm bowls already set at the table. "Morning," he said simply. Lily gave a small wave. Eli climbed into the nearest chair, his thin arms hugging the edge of the table. Maya hesitated, but when she caught Daniel's eye, she offered a faint, sleepy smile. Then Clara entered. Her hair was damp from a rushed wash, pulled back in a loose braid. She wore an old flannel shirt of Daniel's. He'd left it by the guest room door that morning. On her, it looked oversized and uncertain, like a life she hadn't decided whether to trust. "You didn't have to cook," she said. Daniel turned off the stove. Didn't mind. They sat together in silence, the kind that settled between strangers when politeness has run out and real things begin to stay. The triplets ate hungrily, still too quiet for children their age. Daniel watched them. They looked better today. Clara nodded, eyes down. They're used to less. The words landed heavily. Daniel didn't ask her to explain. Not yet. Later that day, Clara offered to help with chores. He gave her a basket of laundry and pointed toward the line stretched across the yard. He watched from the porch as she hung clothes with practiced hands, pausing to tie back strands of hair escaping the braid. The children played in the dirt nearby, drawing invisible pictures with sticks. There was something deliberate about the way she moved. Careful, as though the ground might break beneath her. "I'm not staying long," she said later that afternoon, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Just until I can figure out where to go." Daniel didn't look up from the potatoes he was peeling. "No rush." She hesitated. "You don't even know me." "I didn't know the mailman either, and he still brings me letters," he replied dryly. A laugh escaped her before she could catch it. It was soft, surprised. For a moment, it changed her face, less guarded, more alive. But the light vanished just as quickly. That night, the wind picked up again, rustling the old trees out back. Daniel found Clara sitting on the porch steps, wrapped in a worn blanket, staring at the moonlit fields. "Can't sleep?" he asked, stepping out beside her. She shook her head. "Too quiet. I keep listening for something." Daniel sat down a few feet away. "What are you expecting to hear?" "A car. A knock. Footsteps." Her voice trembled. "My husband has a way of finding things when it's too late to stop him." It was the first time she mentioned him. Daniel said nothing. "He was good at first," she began, her voice barely audible above the wind. "Charming. Reliable. He wore a uniform, stood straight, made promises. Then deployments came. Then excuses. Then the lies. And the bruises." He turned slightly, but didn't speak. "I never cheated on him," Clara whispered, as if the words were still dangerous. "But he did. Repeatedly. And each time, he came home angrier, more convinced it was my fault. Said I had someone else. Accused me of seducing his brother, his friends, his boss." Daniel clenched his jaw. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken things. "I should have left sooner," she said. "But I had the kids. No job. Nowhere to go. And he knew that." Daniel glanced at her then, really looked, at the faint scars beneath her sleeves, at the tension in her shoulders, at the resilience she wore like armor stitched with exhaustion. "You're safe here," he said quietly, "as long as you need." Her eyes met his, searching for something buried in that promise. For once, she didn't look away. A door creaked upstairs, the children stirring. Clara stood. "Thank you. For the room. For breakfast. For not asking too much." He watched her retreat into the house. When the door closed behind her, Daniel sat in the dark a moment longer, listening to the wind bend the grass across the fields. Something had shifted, not just in the house, but in him. He'd opened his door to a stranger. Now, her story sat in the air like dust unsettled. And though his heart still bore the shadow of a love he'd buried, he couldn't ignore the pull forming in the spaces between grief and the quiet promise of healing. Tomorrow, he thought, would bring questions he hadn't yet asked. But tonight, the silence didn't feel so empty. The past knocks loudest. Daniel had just finished feeding the hens when he saw the dust cloud rolling down the date road, an unfamiliar car carving its way toward the farmhouse. The morning had been quiet, Clara and the children still asleep upstairs. The rising sun cast long shadows across the field, but this shadow, moved with purpose. A black SUV pulled to a stop just beyond the gate. The engine idled, low and throaty. Daniel stood with a pitchfork still in hand, heart suddenly alert. When the driver's door opened, the man who stepped out wore civilian clothes, but everything in his posture screamed military. Shoulders squared, chin up, presence calculated. Jason Reyes. Even without an introduction, Daniel knew. He matched the face from the photograph, the man with one arm around Clara, smiling like he owned everything he touched. Jason's eyes scanned the property with contempt thinly disguised as confidence. "You Daniel Grant." Daniel nodded once. Jason extended a hand that Daniel didn't take. "I'm looking for my wife." Daniel didn't flinch. "She's not your concern anymore." Jason's jaw twitched, but he smiled, rehearsed and insincere. "That's not for you to decide. I've been searching for her for months. You don't know the full story." Daniel rested the pitchfork against the fence. "I know she's scared of you." Jason's smile faltered. "She's a complicated woman, prone to dramatics. She takes things personally, accuses people when she's the one." "I think you should leave," Daniel said, his voice like steel under velvet. Jason stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You think she told you the truth? You think she's some helpless angel? Ask her about Corporal Bennett. Ask her what she was doing while I was deployed. You're not her savior, Farmer. You're just another man she's using to escape guilt." The words stung more than Daniel expected. He stood silent as Jason walked back to his SUV, pausing before getting in. "She's good at playing wounded," Jason said. "Makes you want to fix her. But broken things don't stay fixed. They cut you eventually." The vehicle roared to life and peeled down the road, flinging gravel in its wake. Daniel didn't move for a long moment. Doubt slid in like frost beneath the skin. Upstairs, Clara was waiting. She stood barefoot in the hallway, her face pale, eyes wide. She had seen the SUV from the window. Her arms were wrapped protectively around herself as if shielding against an old blow that might still land. "He found me," she whispered. Daniel didn't respond immediately. Something inside him had twisted when Jason spoke. Not because he believed him, but because part of him wanted to. It was easier than admitting the fear clawing at his chest. "I didn't cheat," Clara said suddenly. "Not physically. I wrote letters. I confided in someone when Jason stopped answering. But it was words. Just words." She stepped forward. Jason read one of them. "He called me a liar. Said I'd disgraced him. That I'd slept with someone behind his back. I hadn't. I was lonely. And stupid. And scared. And he used it to destroy me." Daniel studied her face. There was no lie there. Just shame, worn raw. "He always needed a villain," she said. "So he made me one." Daniel felt something cold inside him loosen, then fall away. "I'm not looking to be anyone's savior," he said. "But I won't let him hurt you again." Tears welled in Clara's eyes, but she blinked them back. "I didn't come here to make you choose between helping and doubting. If you want me gone." "I don't," he cut in firmly. "But I need you to tell me everything. No more shadows." She nodded, slow and solemn. That evening, as the children played quietly in the living room, Daniel sat at the kitchen table, Clara across from him, and listened as she told the rest of his story. How Jason used silence as a weapon. How kindness from others had become punishable offenses. How she'd learned to keep her voice small so it wouldn't be used against her. By the time she finished, there was no more room for doubt. Only the aching weight of truth and the quiet fury that someone had broken her so carefully. Daniel stood and placed his hand on the back of her chair, not touching her, but close enough that she felt his presence. "I built this house with my wife," he said. "She was the best part of me, and I thought when I buried her, I buried the rest of my life with her. But maybe there's more left than I thought." Clara looked up at him. "You don't have to carry my story." "I won't carry it," he said. "I'll walk beside it." Outside, dusk had fallen, but inside, something steady and warm took root between them. Not a spark, not yet, but the slow burn of trust finally beginning to glow. A room that feels like home. The days that followed Jason's visit unfolded quietly, like petals resisting bloom in late spring. Clara remained on edge, her movements more cautious, her smiles brief and guarded. Yet the air in the farmhouse was subtly changing, less haunted, more human. Daniel noticed the small things first. How Clara paused to warm the children's socks before they slipped them on. How she started humming when she washed dishes. How, one afternoon, Maya clutched his hand in the barn and whispered, "You're strong like Mama." He didn't know what to say to that. Strength, to him, had always looked like Helen, her fire, her will. Clara's strength was different, quieter, built from surviving, not conquering. Clara didn't ask to stay longer, but she didn't pack, either. The unspoken understanding settled between them like the faint creak of old floorboards. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was learning to exist, to exhale. One morning, Daniel passed by the guest room and noticed something that hadn't been there before, a child's drawing, pinned to the wall. Cranes on scrap paper, rough but bright. 4 figures holding hands beneath a crooked sun. He paused. One of them wore a farmer's hat. That evening, he found Clara folding laundry in the quiet. Her hair was loose for the first time, falling softly past her shoulders. "You're still here," he said. She looked up, surprised. "Do you want me to go?" He shook his head. "No, I want to understand what it means that you haven't." Clara set the towel aside. "I don't know yet. I've never stayed anywhere because I wanted to. Only because I had no other choice. You have one now." Her gaze drifted toward the window. "It's hard to believe this isn't temporary. That something this calm could last." Daniel stepped closer, not intruding, just near. "It doesn't have to be permanent yet. Just real." Clara exhaled, a long, careful breath. That night, while the children slept, Clara found herself alone in the kitchen. She reached into the drawer where she kept her scattered belongings and pulled out a small leather-bound notebook. Worn, fragile. She began writing. "Today, I made soup without Faye. I heard the wind and didn't think of footsteps. I heard a man's voice and didn't flinch. I looked at Daniel and didn't see danger. I saw someone who lets me breathe." She paused, her pen hovering. "But I still feel guilty. Because something in me wants this to be more. Wants to rest, even though I haven't earned it." She closed the notebook and returned it to the drawer just as Daniel walked in, barefoot and quiet, holding a folded piece of paper. "I found this in Helen's journal," he said, offering it to her. Clara hesitated, then unfolded it. The paper had yellowed slightly, but the handwriting was clear, careful. "If someone makes this house feel alive again, don't shut the door because of me. Love doesn't die. It just waits for a place to land." Clara blinked rapidly, lips parting but no words escaping. Daniel stepped closer, and this time, he reached for her hand. "She gave me permission long before you arrived. I just didn't know it." A single tear traced down Clara's cheek. "I'm still healing. So am I." They stood in the stillness, the moment suspended between what they were and what they could become. It wasn't a kiss or a confession. It was something gentler. A choice. A shared silence filled with understanding. In the following days, a new routine emerged. Clara and Daniel co-managed the chores. The triplets flourished, their laughter gradually replacing the echoes of hunger. Trust replaced tension. There were no promises yet, no declarations. But there was warmth where once there was only survival. One evening, as the children drew more pictures at the table, Eli looked up and asked, "Are we going to stay here forever?" Clara smiled. Then she turned to Daniel, and he answered, simply, "If you want to."